Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Welcome to LibernetLIVE. Libernet is a project and community that aims to marry blockchain, NFTs, and crypto technologies with books and literature and the publishing world that before has been scourged by the middleman, but for no longer. And that's our little corner. And I'm very gratefully joined today by Elan. Hi, Elan. How are you today?
Hello. Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a pretty hectic sort of disorienting week for me. But it's been good. It's been good. I think I don't know. I think the past couple of weeks at least has been quite disorienting for a lot of people. I mean, the NFT space moves so quickly. Every day there's a whole new thing to think about. And as someone that is much more focused on sort of promotion, either that through podcast interviews and writings. So our priorities do change all the time, and it kind of leaves you a bit like, okay, like I suppose in the 50s or 60s, you'd have a business plan. You'd have a solid business plan, and you could plan out the next 10 to 20 years, and you'd be pretty reliable. You'd be like, yep, people are going to need this product for 10 to 20 years, and there won't be any competition.
Yeah.
Now it's like it is so liquefied and
It's
fluid.
warp speed.
It's warp. Yeah. It's absolutely warp speed. I'm sure I'm quite new to this world. I'm sure you'd have a bit more insight into what this whole thing is.
You know what? I was just going to say that I'm actually new to this world. So I'm like, man, you probably have more info on what's going on than I do. So we'll see how this goes.
Well, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Well, the thing about, it was interesting when you were sort of talking to me about, how you discovered this world. You said by accident. I think that's interesting because I think that's in some way that's how everyone most people have discovered this, because it's not something that society, society and culture have sort of said like, oh, this is the new thing coming up. It's this sort of digital underbelly that people are sort of like, wait, what's this? And then people are like, as a result, sort of like, but this could be the new hot thing, as you said before.
Yeah. No. And from this, I actually have so many questions that I want to ask you. And it's so funny because I know you're the interviewer and you're going to be asking me questions. So many things I want to get your thoughts on.
We can do either way. We can do both.
We can ping back and forth. But, as I was explaining earlier, I found out about this world through Clubhouse. And it was a new app at the time, and I guess it's still relatively new. It hasn't quite caught on to the levels of Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. And I was turning off all my notifications for Clubhouse because of all of the annoying banners I kept getting every 5 minutes. And in the process of this, I see a notification that Gary Vee is in a room, and I'm like, oh man, I want to check this out. Being that out here in sunny LA, I had interviewed for one of Gary Vee's companies, didn't get the job, and that's okay. I got hired by Disney. And so I've been at Disney for about 6 years. And so it all worked out. Needless to say, I still wanted to hear what Gary Vee said because he's just so good at being ahead of the herd. And
he's a bit of a prophet. What's the word? He can his sort of predictions have always been kind of eerily spot on. And you hear him sort of saying in the 90s, online dating is going to be a thing. People will use the online platforms as their primary way to date someone. And people are like, that's crazy. And then and then investing in Facebook. And then obviously I remember him saying, get on TikTok. And back in 2018 when people were saying you're crazy, that it's a cringy place, it's a goofy place. And then he was like, it's goofy until it's not. And what I think the best staple of that flip in perception is that the subreddit called TikTok Cringe was named because it was cringy at the time. And now that same subreddit with the same name is dedicated to just posting TikToks that people find entertaining, whether they're cringy or not, and my point is he has been very accurate. And now he's sort of saying NFTs are this new world, and he's announced NFT launch where he's made these sort of doodles, these sorts of animal characters that each represent a different kind of strength or value that someone might have living a sort of hardworking or happy or contented or blissful or grateful life. And you know, it's like I don't know, like grateful goldfish. I'm
cool.
And it is pretty cool. And I kind of saw it coming, because I saw these like little things popping up in the sort of thing, and he was like, "Oh, I've got something coming up," and I was like, "I bet it's those drawings that he's been drawing," and it was as well. Yeah, it was. And he's got these, and now he's got a Discord thing called V Friends. Funnily enough, I found myself kind of gloating a bit, because I was like, he hasn't been speaking about Discord groups, and he still doesn't know about DAOs. He still doesn't know about decentralized autonomous organizations. And I'm like, I think I'm a little bit ahead of him, because I think DAOs are going to be absolutely huge in terms of decentralizing and liquefying and fluidifying. That's not a bloody word, but making workflow more fluid and free and creatively motivated. So
I think you just use, correct me if I'm wrong, ephemeria, which is where you kind of make up your own world, own word.
Yes,
it's pretty common. So that's what Alice in Wonderland, Curiouser and Curiouser. So yeah, totally, you can make up those words. Anyway, that's my English nerd hat coming on.
Oh yeah.
Don't mind me.
Don't worry. Don't worry. So yeah,
but it was so interesting. So you said something I actually was not as discerning as you were, because Gary Vee in the Clubhouse room was on the Kool-Aid room, the Kool-Aid man. And so I was like, oh, I bet you there's going to be a Kool-Aid NFT. This is what Gary Vee is hyping up. So that's what I ended up tracking down. But it wasn't, I don't think the Kool-Aid project ended up being anything.
Well, a few things of his anyway that sort of end up, you know, I think but like we were saying, that the space moves so quickly that, you know, that you just, you know, and one thing that sort of Gary that really it really strikes me as consistent with Gary Vee is his ability to be completely open to a new idea. Like he almost the business plan is almost non-existent with Gary Vee. You know, he is kind of like, just like, I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way now. And he fully embraces how quickly things change, and that's admirable in my opinion. It's a very
so cool,
and it obviously completely works, because the climate that we're in is so fluid and so constantly changing. You know,
he's like the very nimble, very flexible hype man. It's like you need the hype man, and then you also need the doer, and he seems to execute both pretty well, which I love.
That's right. I mean, so yeah, what about NFTs? Attracted you specifically in terms of the form and what medium it was, and, you know, what NFTs were you sort of looking at the beginning that will make you go, oh, this is something I should really focus on?
Yeah. Okay. So wait, let me go back to the story. So Clubhouse, Gary Vee, he's talking about NFTs. I didn't even know what NFTs were. I just messaged my mom. I'm like, hey, I think this is a new investment opportunity. So for me, it was all about like long-term investing, especially as there aren't a lot of women investors compared to men investors, and especially women of color. So that was something that was important to me. It was, now that I know that it's more art centric, that also kind of just speaks to my world as an artist. But at the time, it was mainly, hey, let's get in this, let's invest. And what was cool was, so we had invested in Bitcoin like back in 2017, 2018, and we ended up pulling that money out and donating it, the money that we had made. And it's so funny because both my mom and I were happy that we donated the money, but now we're a little bit salty because we're like, oh, we could have had more money, but it went to a good cause.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, I think everyone was kind of kicking themselves, you know. I think my friend Sam a few years ago got gifted 3 Bitcoin or whatever, and I think he lost the hard wallet. You know, that's another horror story that's quite common. I mean, that's over 100 grand in British pounds at this point, you know. But you know, like, there's always a lesson in everything, I find, and there's always opportunity, even in the worst times. You know, opportunity to go, like, you know, right, I know never to make that mistake again. And now I know, even if some ludicrous thing comes up that is obviously ridiculous and everyone just shuns, maybe it's interesting to sort of just play with that and go with it, you know. I'm not even a huge fan of like Dogecoin, for example. I don't like the meme, and I one of my central motivations to invest is whether I just like it or not. And I think that's a much better motivator than sort of, I don't know, sort of meticulously looking at the meter going, oh, it's going down, or it's going, you know, as people will often say, like, oh, it's going, but like, anyway, I understand the value of Doge in terms of the sort of the ethos behind it, and the ethos is is that the the world of ideas is governed by people, and it's governed by people to create absurd things, to create things that are entertaining and meaningful. And I know that's what Doge is all about. And this is the currency that represents that entire idea. So even though I'm not personally interested in Doge, I was like, okay, I'll buy 100 and just leave it there. You know, I had the intention of maybe selling a bit after the Saturday Night Live show with Elon Musk, which happened yesterday, which me and my friend Liam were both sort of saying, we think it's going to go up after a while. But obviously, like, Elon Musk was apparently like said something, I don't know, he apparently is very strange, and then like it like plummeted down. But I'm just sort of like, but I'm not particularly, I don't care too much. I'm just sort of like, that's funny. It was 50 quid, and it's like 35 now. It's funny to me anyway. But yeah, anyway, it is. It is. I mean, it's interesting. It is very interesting to see the sort of the world change. So the world change in the way that it has, and like you were saying before, it is interesting seeing these sorts of seeing how investments have become so decentralized to people. And that's something, within a few months, like, I think more people have put money in investments now than I don't know the statistic exactly, but it's significantly huge. And a lot of, and I think a lot of investors were sort of wealthy white men. And this is the sort of, and this is a very unfortunate kind of like, thing that we can now like sort of decentralize and democratize and bring to people so they can make the choices that they want to make. So.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And there's like even this whole like, and this is, I hope this doesn't like derail us or take us in another direction, but it's so interesting with even the projects that are out now. I'm like, the bar for entry is like, you see, there was one project, I won't say the name, that it looks so cool and I wanted to invest in. And you see like all these CryptoPunk guys kind of getting into it on Twitter. And then you go and it's like the bar for entry is maybe like, 1 ETH, and I'm like, oh my God, who can afford that? Like, certainly not me. And so it's like, how do you get in on like projects that are accessible to like everyone at every economic level? And I think that racially, I think it kind of ties into here in America, at least, I don't know what it's like in the UK, is just class and race and how much income you're bringing in and what you can afford to invest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, I'm not sure exactly how it is for the UK. I don't think it's quite as significant in America. But like, I know in America, it's in the architecture. Like, with is it red line? I don't. Is it red stripe? No, red stripe's a bit. Redlining is the the sort of it's where with neighborhoods would be grown based on race laws, and those race laws would disappear. But now we have these communities of African Americans that cannot actually integrate into these businesses, not because of anyone's inherently racist, but because of history. And when people, it's so funny when people sort of say like, oh, people aren't racist anymore, and it's like, it doesn't. Yes, they are, but it doesn't even matter if you want to talk about that, because it's in the architecture, in the way that neighborhoods are structured, and the way that these businesses have much more investments and they're doing much better. It's undeniable, and bringing back to investing, you're absolutely right, and that's going to obviously come into investing, and as a result, opportunities that African American people will face in terms of not being able to have opportunities that they clearly deserve just as much as everyone else. What's interesting, what I like about this space is, it's a new space. Those architectural divides are gone. That's what's interesting about this whole thing. This is the interesting thing about it. And just to answer your sort of thing about these sorts of, these crypto groups in which you have to pay like 1 ETH to sort of prove yourself worthy. I don't think those groups will last very long, purely because there's still that clique. There's like it's kind of like, oh, you're not, which is bollocks. The whole thing about, the whole reason for this is to not be like that, and to not create these sorts of false divisions that just say, oh, you're not rich enough to be part of our, like, those things will die off because there's no place for them. The crypto world at its most virtuous core is completely against all of that. So
Yeah, no, I love that. And what's been really cool about the one like organization that I'm a part of, the PizzaDAO, like that's been so cool. And like one of the guys, I only know him by his pizza name, which is so funny. I should know these people by their real names, by the way. I'm Pizza Haiku on the PizzaDAO. So I rarely know anyone's real names, but it was so cool because he's like, yeah, we need more women in this, and like we need more women of color. And he's sending me a message. He's like, yeah, I have 2 daughters and I want to teach them about like investing in NFTs. And I'm like, this is awesome. So it has been like a really inclusive space, and like just people being super supportive. I've reached out to just so many people with questions as a newbie. I'm like, wait, can you explain this? Like, I don't know how minting works. Like, I don't know what this is. And there was always a fear of like, oh, people are going to think like I'm dumb or that I'm not like, savvy enough to be in this world. But everyone has been super supportive.
That's exactly it. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about it. I'm now in a sort of place where I'm maybe slightly more educated than the average person, and I will get, I want to get a couple of people involved. Like I want to get a writing editor involved for what we do. If it's like a Libernet, which is they bring books to blockchain, whatever. And she's a writer. She loves writing. She's an editor, and I'm like, come into the Discord. Don't be intimidated. I'm kind of saying what they told me a couple months ago. It's like, don't worry, you'll learn. But even then, I can't seem to shake her anxiety in a lot of ways because, like what are all these? What does that mean? And you're too afraid to ask because you don't want to look like an idiot. And it's like, I mean, I'm still quite daunted by a lot of PizzaDAO's stuff. I'm like, what the hell is going on in here? And I spoke to Snacks about it. Was it Peanut Chews that you spoke to by any chance?
No, it was Los Montana. Okay. I'm gonna have to spell out his name for you. But yes, I have been in meetings with Peanut Chews. He seems also a quite lovely guy.
Lovely guy. I've done a couple of interviews with him on this podcast as well. He's really cool. He's a really cool guy. That's the thing, that this space is like it is so interesting. It's so counterintuitive. When you join the space, you're like, okay, where's my task? And then they're like, anything you like, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Why? What? And then I had to like I wanted to and I was like, and then some guy was like, I need some music for this, and I was like, okay, I'll make it for you. And then they're like, okay, and I'm like, where's the bureaucratic process? Where's the interview?
Yeah.
Where's the shortlisting? Where's the punishment for making mistakes, as would be found in almost every corporate structure? It's so strange, and it's unfortunate for people to hear it just from me and you speaking about it, because they're like, what are they talking about? And it's kind of like you have to see it. You have to see it yourself. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so it is very interesting.
And it's so funny when I joined the PizzaDAO, because again, I was looking for a long-term investment. I'm like, oh, these pizza boxes seem like they'll be cool, great. And then, I missed the drop, and I'm like, you know what? I love how they're going to be supporting small pizza shops, businesses all over the world. Maybe I'll just see if I could donate some money to the cause. So I reach out and I'm like, hey, would just like love to donate, blah, blah, blah. Let me know how I could pitch in. And it was just so cool. Similar to what you were saying, they're like, well, hey, do you want to be part of the group? Do you want to what can you do? And I'm like, well, I'm not an artist, I'm a writer. And they're like, great. Do you want to write this? And I'm like, okay. And then I write it and I send it to them, and they're like, great, this is great. And I'm like, what? I don't understand what just happened. I'm like, this was so seamless.
Yes. Oh yes, it's so seamless. And I have written an essay for the book that we're going to be doing, PizzaDAO, and Dylan, he sent me, I want you to write an essay on this. It's called The Tao of the DAO, and I want you to connect Taoism and the DAO. And I was like, okay, let's try it. And a lot of that I was sort of speaking about kind of how jaw-dropping the work ethic has been, because when you imagine 2,000 people in a Discord group, and there's a kind of there's some incentive and there's some money behind it, but not not much sort of pressure or punishment, you're like, this is going to be chaotic. Nothing's going to get done. And you look at the work they've done in like, but at that time it was like a month and a half, and it's like, it's astounding. It's unbelievable how much has actually been how much they've pulled off, and that's and my go-to reason is it's because people aren't being punished and people aren't being sort of regress to like, so I can't do this because I'll make a mistake, because and that's kind of the whole ethos behind it. Like people in corporate structures are being being sort of pushed out of their creative capacities because they're worried about. I mean, it reminds me of university. You go to university and you're like, oh, you're the big person now, and I go into first year seminars and people are like, does anyone have any questions? Nothing. And then, even then there'd be sort of like, no stupid questions. And then people are still like, just no one's saying anything. And they got into third year and people were still shy. People were still afraid to say something stupid, because there was that punitive attitude still implicit. It's like, oh, you're, this it's reflecting that whole, you're here now, this is your job, you're an adult now. All of these kinds of things that are really predicated on fear. It's the fear. It's the stick rather than the carrot. It's like, you've got to do this. Think about what could go wrong if you make a mistake. All of that sort of thing. And when you come to this sort of place, like PizzaDAO or Cypher or what we'll do when we create make some sort of DAO ourselves, it's like not, we don't it doesn't have to be like this, So
I have two thoughts to that. First thought, I want to read your essay. I also contributed to the book. I did a short story.
Oh, awesome.
I did Star-Baked Lovers. But I want to read your essay. That sounds wonderful.
Yes,
and
I'll read.
Send it to me. Seriously, I love writing. I love reading other people's works. It'll be so cool. And second thought, I think too, what draws me to the PizzaDAO space, and maybe that's why it draws me to my job at Disney, which I absolutely love, by the way, is passion.
I do want to talk about that as well. Yeah, but please go on.
Oh yeah, passion. Yeah. And I think what's really cool is in the PizzaDAO space, because like you said, it's not like, I don't know, there's not like a life-changing amount of money. It's almost like, but it's a little more than a hobby. It's like people all coming together, like united by this common goal. Like people are genuinely passionate about that. And I think if you didn't have that, like, if you didn't have this sense of like, oh, I want to embrace this, and you think of embracing things of like, you typically embrace things that you love. You don't embrace things that you're lukewarm about. And so I think it's that like, oh, this is something cool that keeps people motivated, along with there is the absence of the fear punitive, and it's like people can then pursue their passion without that like overhanging fear on their back. And so that's what I love.
Absolutely. And that for me is, of course, why I think people work much faster. I remember like I was before I got this job, I was doing a laboring course, and I sort of like to look at these sorts of things a bit analytically and be like, okay, what are you getting paid to do as an officer that's trying to recruit me? And I realized, I was like, this is so inefficient. People are going so slowly, and like we had to spend like 4 hours just filling out like a form, and they were online call, and people were filling out a form. And I'm sure all of these emails are being sent out, all of these sorts of things were organized. And I was thinking, like, what's the actual net gain out of all of this work that they're being paid for by the government? And I was like, it's probably not a lot, and everyone's still like, I mean, everyone and everyone, not only is everyone still so inefficient and obviously, just working the bare minimum because they hate what they do, most likely, but also like, I remember sort of, I was going a bit far ahead, and then you're like, oh, you done this? Yeah. I was like, oh, sorry, mate, I'm a page ahead. And he's like, oh, okay then. And then he was like, can you tell me this question? I was like, oh no, not. I was not quite that far ahead. He's like, oh, you said you were far ahead. You were, were doing all of this, and then all of this sort of chuckle was, and it's like, and it just comes back, this sort of this big fear culture, this big sort of one-upmanship, and how can I prove to myself that my ego can't be shattered at like the snap of a finger. This is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. One-upmanship. Yeah. That's what it's about. in the corporate world. And that's why you don't see that in the DAO. There is no, oh, I gotta like one up you for this place in the book. It's like, nah, just create. It's cool.
Absolutely. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny sort of, it's very funny because I'm having a lot of people now, my book's an NFT, as part of one of the front running books for this publishing company that Dylan and et al have founded. And, a lot of people just sort of say, so what's an NFT? How does it really, how does it work or whatever? And then I end up I sort of end up getting coerced into sort of speaking about the technical advantages. But what's funny is that when I'm actually here speaking to the people that are in this movement, there's almost none of that. Obviously the technical side is very important, but the real ethos behind it is because we want to let the artist win, and that's the vast majority of what I have received. Through this sort of, there's none of this sort of like, oh, it's a good investment, get it going now, we'll beat the general crowd. No, like that almost something. It's just like, no, we believe that creators should create and they should be rewarded fairly. They should be encouraged to create, so when I sort of hear them ask like, what is they about, I'm often like, obviously it's not their fault, but I'm often like, you're not really asking the right questions. I don't think you should sort of be asking like, is this an opportunity for artists to get their due finally? That's kind of the question that I'd like to answer more.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because I even had to like create that fork in the road, like compartmentalize that in my head, where I'm like, okay, cryptocurrency is whatever I decide to invest in cryptocurrencies, that's going to be for long-term investment. And I'm like, NFT is really going to be a space for, in my mind, for art and creation. So I had to kind of create that dividing line. And it's so hard when you hear in the news, like, NFT sold for $6 million. And of course, people are going to be like, oh, I want to buy an NFT. How could I get an NFT that's going to sell for $6 million? And so I think that's where it gets a little tricky when people hear like these astronomical like numbers and prices. And of course, it's life-changing wealth. And so for me, now knowing what an NFT is, I like how you describe that, how it's like an artist can finally get their due. And as an artist who has 2 self-published books and figuring that out along the way, it's like, so yeah, this is really cool. And I'm so glad that Dylan invited me to do this because I'm like, oh, this could be really cool. So yeah, that's kind of how I've had to like branch it off in my mind. I'm like, cryptocurrencies, investment, NFTs. It's like, oh, this is like my space for an artist to play, which is really cool.
Well, I do a similar thing. I mean, I obviously see the value in cryptocurrency as an investment. Should it be up as a value? But like, again, referring back to how I invest, I suppose I invest. I suppose I choose things based on how much they can improve qualities of people's experiences, and I find cryptocurrency to do exactly that. So obviously, it's a good investment technically and rationally, but I'm also thinking like, people's lives will be benefited far better if people themselves can choose how money is made and how money is distributed and how money is used. And when I think about that and I compare it to sort of, the US dollar or even the British pound or anything like that, all made behind closed doors, all printed whenever people want to print them. I have to think like, this seems like a much more meaningful currency that will have value to people's lives, and so will have value monetarily in the future. If the banks don't get together and criminalize the whole thing like they did with marijuana in the 30s or whatever, I'm waiting for that kind of like, that kind of smear campaign. Although I'm sure they've tried already and it hasn't worked, but who knows? We'll see what happens anyway. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm obviously thinking about it as a possibility, but I'm still like, I don't care. I'm still gonna, I still believe in it in the same way I believe in anything that has a high chance of, being smeared by, so. But that's kind of the risk you have to take. I mean, people often also say, but it's a risk. What if it goes down? And it's like, that's not the point. I don't think. Like, I don't like, it's, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up. But I think you have to look past the meter and sort of see, where real value lies for people, and that's kind of that's my whole ethos behind why I do a lot of these things, I suppose.
That's so cool because it's I love hearing your perspective, and now I almost want to go back and challenge my own perspective because of course I'm like, oh, the stock market is a little bit slow and I have some money in stock, and I'm like, oh, this is great for, like, again, long-term investing. But I like how you phrase it or frame it as, is this technology going to benefit society long term? And I think that's a more healthy outlook to
Hmm.
have. So yeah, that's really interesting. That's
Thank you.
something I'm going to reflect on.
So I mean, I think it's a far less stressful mindset to have. I think because in terms of that whole thing, um, you know, I you know, I mean, that's the kind of thing. I think that's how we do things anyway. You know, like regardless of investing, you know, I go to my local bar because I like them as people and I like what they do and I want to support them. You know, and you know, obviously, if I were to spend the same amount in a bar, which would be quite a lot, on like a sort of company that I like, people would be like, "Ah, oh, you're throwing your money away," and it's like, well, you know. If I did it at the bar, I'd be spending it on them. No, I wouldn't get that money back at all, and I'd probably have a blistering hangover the next morning. So you know, it's your ups and downs.
No, I totally get that. This is going to sound so silly, but when I go to pick up my prescription medicine, I go to Ralph's Pharmacy, a superstore out here in LA, and
Yeah.
I go to grocery store out here, and I always get phone calls and like email ads for Express Scripts where they're like, "We can deliver it to your door," and I'm like,
Mm.
"No, I know the people at my pharmacy. I
Yeah.
know them by name. I always say hi, and I don't want to like, I don't want to lose that."
Yeah.
Just for the
Yeah.
sake of
Yeah.
convenience. So I totally get what you're saying.
For sure. I mean, there's like a sort of I don't know, like a sort of Facebook sort of meme story. I'm not sure if it's true, but some guy says to a man at a bank, you know, an old man at a bank, he's like, "Oh, why do you always go into the bank to get your money? You know, you can do it all online." And this man's like I you know, this is all I have. Like I get to go out, I get to see people, I get to see the woman in the bank. You know,
Oh,
it's a sweet story. It might not be true,
yeah.
but like, you know, this is you know, when we do sort of like it's very dangerous when we do sort of like, you know, cut things off based on sort of efficiency and convenience. You know, I think, you know, the problem is that we lose so much along the way, and when people do sort of rely on that kind of comfort to, you know, the comfort of like, oh yeah, I'll work the job, I'll pay my taxes, I'll do this, I'll support the, you know, after a while, you know, you have to, you know, there is that kind of just that, there's that calling. It's like, you know, saying you could you know, you could you know, take the plunge and take the risk and do things that you do things that you believe in, even if you know that they might not work out. And this is, you know, but that's kind of like this is kind of what attracts me to this world as well. You know, it's a huge risk. This whole thing's a huge,
Yeah.
this whole thing's a huge risk, and I'm very aware of that. I think most of us are, and that's
Yeah.
exactly that kind of motivates us more to do it in a lot of ways. You know, if it wasn't the
Yeah.
risk, where would be the fun? You know.
I know. I'm like, it would be boring if it weren't a risk.
Yeah. So Elan, so yeah, tell us a bit about, you know, Disney and what your position
What
is.
my day
How
job is?
yeah. And we could maybe find a way to sort of tie in that sort of creativity with what we you know, with what we're
Yeah.
doing here. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so hey, first off, I love my job at Disney. I'm not being paid to say this. They are honestly, my team in particular. I work on consumer products. I have the coolest team in the whole wide world. I tell people prior to Disney, I worked 5 different jobs, all well-paying jobs, and a lot of those jobs, I was the typical, I guess, millennial in a sense, where I would job hop because nothing could kind of hold my interest. And when I landed at Disney, um, I think people ask like, "Oh, do you like it here?" And I'm like, "Well, if I didn't like it, I would have left already," because
Yeah.
that's just the type of person that I am. And so 6 years later, and when I say people on my team, like 6 years, I'm still young. There have been people on our team who my boss just celebrated 27 years at the company. So that's
Yeah.
you kind of get a sense of yeah, it's just cool. I don't know. My team in particular, like I work on taglines and product copy. And so you're probably thinking, what is that? And I don't have an example in front of me, but imagine that you're going out to buy this coaster
Mm,
and you see like a tagline on it.
mm,
Um, that's what I do. So the stuff, if you're gonna get a shirt with a cool slogan on it, or a notebook with a cool slogan on it,
yeah.
or mug, coaster, anything, I create the taglines. And well, that's one part of my job. Actually, I do anything with words. Actually, I am deeming myself the word wizard. And if my boss
That's
ever
right.
listens to
Yeah.
this, he
Yeah.
will tease me mercilessly because he's amazing. He's so I honestly have the best boss in the world. His name is George McClements. Shout out to George. And you will see in the PizzaDAO book, it was actually his concept for Star-Baked Lovers, and I just wrote it up because he's a children's book author outside of work. So coolest guy.
Okay.
He has a sleeve of tattoos all over, and his whole office is decked out with Star Wars arcade machines and Pee Wee Herman and Muppets. So that tells you anything. He's probably the coolest guy ever. So I was really lucky to get him as a boss.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so as far as my writing, sorry, it's a little all over the place. I write across franchises. So what that means is I will write taglines for Mickey, I will write taglines for Minnie, and then that's one franchise. And then I'll jump over and I'll write taglines for the Disney princesses. That's another franchise. I'll then hop over and write taglines for the Disney villains. Then I'll hop over and I'll write taglines for Darth Vader. And then so it's I have to know like how a princess is going to sound versus how Darth Vader is going to sound, or versus how Olaf is going to sound. So it's I have a bunch of different voices always working in. So it's like, you know, how would someone say how would Mickey say Merry Christmas versus Elsa from Frozen? And so it's a lot of that. And I'll come up with hundreds of these taglines. So it's a pretty fast-paced job. But what's really cool is because Disney is always coming up with so many awesome content. I mean, I've not even gotten into the world of WandaVision and everything going on with Marvel and Disney Plus, which I will get there, no spoilers. There's always something new. Like you're not just stuck in the same wheel of working on one property or one franchise. You're literally like working on it all. So it keeps my job interesting. And similar to what we were just talking about, I love a challenge. And so those are the best projects where it's like, okay, we're coming up with this concept and we can't quite figure this out. We need your help. And it's like, oh yes, I want it.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be short, doesn't it? The sort of the taglines, they have to be like only a few words. That can be hard. That's hard to do. That's a very hard thing to do.
Yes, I don't think people realize how it's like sometimes I will get the most like challenging requests of like, we need you to say X, Y, and Z in 4 words.
5 words,
like, and it's like, holy cow. And you start counting out and you're like, okay, I got it down to 7 words and it's too long. It's not going to fit. And it's like, oh, and then you have to keep in mind the character tone and voice and brand. And it's like, so it becomes a puzzle. It's literally like word puzzles.
You're like, It's so funny. Because I mean, when you read Nietzsche, you know, and stuff like that, you read Nietzsche and he sort of says, you know, one of his quotes is like, I want to say in 10 words what others would try and say in a whole book, you know. And when you read Nietzsche, you know, what is it? It was it like lucky? I forget. You know the quote, but like, you know, fortunate are, I don't know. Fortunate are the ignorant, or fortunate are the forgetful, for even they get the better of their burden. I forget. I'm really ruining it. But like, you read the quote, it's like, I know, 10 words. I wanted to do a video analysis on it because when you read it, you know, you sort of read like maybe a sort of traditional proverb, and it's like, you know, kind of like, oh yeah, I understand that. When you read Nietzsche, you read that and you're like, oh, he's saying that, and then he's also saying this, but he's saying that one.
Yeah.
So he has to like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to find the quote.
Do it.
What is it? The better. Okay. Nietzsche.
I fully support the Googling. I was actually going to offer to do it. I was like, should I Google this?
It's a really good one. For even, because it really reminds me. Obviously, I'm like philosophy or whatever, but like, so this is kind of how I think about it. For even they get. Let's just hope Google understands. Blessed are the forgetful, for they get the better even of their blunders.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, first of all, he's saying that the forgetful are the blessed, and then he's saying that they get the better even of their blunders, which implies that you have to be forgetful to get over your blunder. But then he's also saying even of their blunders, which implies that he's also getting the better of something that they enjoyed, which also implies that that enjoying something is also something you should get over. And there's so much going on in that, in like
so much
12,
to unpack.
And that's so much to unpack, and this is exactly how I sound, what sounds like, and when I read Nietzsche, I am just like, holy fuck, like this is like, it takes a lot to do something like that. So hats off for that sort of being able to do that. It's but like, yeah, it is because there's always that kind of a sort of admiration or that kind of envy of people, philosophers that write like really dense, huge books that talk about things in detail, and it's like, if you could do it in 4 words.
Yeah, right.
If you could do it in 4 words, you'd get there much. So but I mean, my book's actually about language as well, and sort of and concepts, and like how we can sort of use them as tools as opposed to sort of reflections of reality, which and that is really so that whole thing just really like fascinates
Wait, is
me.
your book? No, I don't want to get it wrong. Plug your book. What's
my
the
book
title of it?
my book's The Ecstasy of Nothing, on language, reality, and the phenomenology of modern experience. We minted it a week ago, I'm gonna say. I think it was a week ago. And yeah, it's a book that sort of it's a sort of an idea that like human civilized life, especially modern life, is very useful and efficient, but it's characterized by obstructing us from reality. And kind of one of the pivotal kind of the pivotal kind of ideas of it is that if we saw reality for how it was, we'd be jumping for joy at all times. We would be like ecstatic, over this sort of absence or nothingness of like, kind of worrying about these things and worrying about these things. And hence the ecstasy of nothing. So, I had this experience when I was 20 after getting psychosis, in which I ended up, I don't know, it was spiritual enlightenment, and it came to me by accident. I'm not sure I earned it or anything. It was just an accidental thing. And it was the most important experience of my life, and probably always will be the most important experience of my life. And I was like, okay, what the hell happened there? Well, what happened that night? And I was like, okay, I think I've got to write about this. And obviously you're trying to write about the ineffable. You can't talk about it. So I had to like work out how to write about something that you can't talk about, which was just such a difficult process. But yeah, like one of the pivotal things is like we are chained by concepts. We are chained by like a language and conceptual patterns that we didn't choose. We didn't choose this. I mean, even in terms of even in terms of like stratifications and sort of human people categories. Like people could like a lot of people can really understand that. But I want to kind of go even further and say like like what that there's so much there's so much that you have that you have been inherited in terms of how you think that doesn't belong to you, and you don't actually doesn't help you in any way at all. But we have a real fear of getting out of it because we don't know what's on the other side. We know, like, it kind of comes back to that comfort thing. We're so used to traditional habitual ways of thinking about things, like, oh yeah, this is stupid, I don't like him, he's stupid, I'm going to do this is what I do at this time of night. All of that. And I write in the book, I think, that we are profoundly resistant to what would be the greatest experience of our lives, because we don't know we don't know how to deal with that. We would be like, where do you put that? Where do you put the category of like, spiritual enlightenment just blowing the walls of everything you've ever tried to understand? And then that's kind of, this is the kind of the point. But I do try and be very rational about it, and sort of, explain the laws of language and how they work. For example, one law is, when we speak, we are, within language, within the structure of language itself, when we speak, we feel the need to agree with, we feel like we must agree with people. It's like when I speak, I'm trying to prove my interpretation of the world is correct. So you must agree. And so with language, we're always trying to like match each other. Unfortunately, this always becomes superficial because we're not actually, when we all just sort of match each other, it's kind of this Chinese whispers game of trying to reach this sort of point that none of us really want to go towards and none of us ever really asked for. And there's also that profound feeling of worry about disagreement. Obviously, if you didn't fear, if you didn't need the sense of agreement, you wouldn't even need to speak. You could just sit in silence and you would just understand that you understood. The fact that we speak means that we are inherently insecure and doubtful of ourselves. And people, it sort of goes against, like, a lot of how people thought about things before. Oh, we speak, we make our mark on the world. Colonialist sort of man's mentality. But it's the other way around for me. When we speak, we are inherently being doubtful by speaking. If I were to say, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm not. If I said, oh, I'm fine, I'm not dying or anything, just randomly, people would be like, well, you okay? Like, obviously by saying that, but if I say, oh, it's a lovely morning, isn't it? If I was certain it was a lovely morning, I wouldn't say anything. That's just kind of one aspect of the book, but mainly coming down to how language is, like we need to be aware. We can't just throw away language. It's kind of with us forever now, but we need to be aware that it's a tool to help us, but we are so wrapped up in thinking that language is us, and perhaps more us than anything else, that we lose our most inherent spiritual and humanistic freedoms as people. That's kind of
okay. I had 10 ideas just circle through me as you were speaking, and one is no. I thought this was all wonderful. And, as a person with ADHD, I was trying my best not to interrupt you, because I'm like, oh, wait, I have something here. And I'm like, no, let him finish his thought. Thank you for giving me the chance to actually improve myself during that process. And one of the thoughts was,
thanks for listening to me for so long.
No. I was like, I wish you were in LA. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many books I want to send you. Just on, I've read really great books on rhetoric, on the art of debate, on etc., on speaking, and then even a really awesome book on figures of speech. And then secondly, so I'm like, man, I almost want to figure out a way to get you these books to read. And also I just love sharing books with people. They're kind of I feel like I'm sharing pieces of me with other people. I don't know if that's weird, but it's books. And second thought was, it's so funny because I love studying English and writing and the craft of writing. And by nature, the dream for me is to be a TV writer. And so that's what I've been working toward. But during this whole process, I've been just studying how the mind works and behavior and human psychology. And it's led me to a couple of different books, one of which is a book on lateral thinking, which I absolutely love and sounds a lot like what you were speaking about. And then the other book, and that's a different tangent, which I'll get to in a second. Another book that I'm reading at the moment is How Numbers Work, and it talks about numbers being the language of our reality. And so I know when you were talking about language, you were probably expressing it in terms of words, and in my mind I almost went to math. And even though, again, I'm not a mathematician, I am an English person, it makes me think of how people even define language in their reality, because I'm sure if we were talking to a mathematician, this would be a very different conversation in and of itself.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's just so fascinating to just how, what is language? And then I started thinking about, this is really cool. If you ever have the time to do it, there is this open source course by the Ivy League College Yale in the US, and they have a course on Dante's Inferno, and he goes through the whole how Dante uses language to just kind of express different. And it's so cool because I didn't realize this with Dante's Inferno, that it's told in obviously it's 3 books, but how you can read the cantos going down vertically, but if you also line up each canto from each book, you can read them horizontally. So canto 1 from Inferno isn't that amazing? It's so cool. It's so cool. And it's stuff like this that just gets me so excited. And I totally recommend checking out this course if you have the time. It's like I said, it's open source, it's totally free. And the instructor is incredible. He's just this Italian guy and he really goes in depth. And there are just so many life lessons. And so I'll stop right here and say, like, as a woman of faith, like I love me some Jesus. It's so
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
how just like how many like nuggets of just spirituality were like painted throughout the book, and one of them being is he talked about like the language of the heavens, and it's so interesting because I'm like, yeah, what was the first language that Adam and Eve spoke? And it just got me thinking on almost
That's a really interesting. That's a very interesting question. It's like, you know,
yeah,
what, you know, what were their meanings? You know, because
yeah,
because in some way, when they ate the apple and they received the knowledge, you know, they were sort of, you know, that, you know, it's kind of like they had no sort of they had no sort of historical backdrop in which to sort of understand things, you know, and perhaps I don't know that, you know, perhaps that's why maybe God was sort of a bit like, oh, this is a bit. I obviously haven't read the Bible, and I'm not personally like religious, but like, you know, like it, but you know, it is. I find that I do find the books that they're very fascinating, and but like I you know I do wonder, like, you know, what how would, you know, traditionally how would they conceptualize things, and and what would, what, you know, what would they choose to do, you know, like, and what, in what ways would they have conceptualized things that are perhaps bad for them, or, you know, you might even say
yeah,
sinful, you might say sinful, you know. And this, you know, and my it's very interesting. I've sort of noticed a connection because, you know, when you talk about Adam and Eve sort of gaining that sort of consciousness and sort of the ability to decide for themselves what's real through language and self-awareness, you're obviously going to fall into a bit of a trap. I actually believe that's the case anyway. Because, you know, whether you believe in, whether you're religious or not, I believe that the fact
yeah,
that we do have the self-awareness means that we have a very intense responsibility, and we don't know that we have that responsibility because we say, oh, it's you know, it's history, oh, it's this, you know, and we deny our actual freedom to sort of be like, actually, these conceptualizations we can choose, and we can choose to dismantle them and face, you know, this you know, and actually realize that they are just kind of human games. Oh, I'm so sorry.
no worries.
um, and face these sort of, you know, these sorts of human games, and sort of, you know, realize that like there is a world beyond all of that, and a world that I'm sure religious people would call God, you know, and this is kind, you know, this is a kind of, this is
Yeah,
the kind of the thing that, you know, this is the kind of, but, you know, this is a kind of essential tenet, I think, across like all cultures. There is kind of this kind of awareness that, you know, human civilization and sort of how we do things sort of does obstruct us in a certain way from this kind of higher spirit, I suppose. And that's, you know, that's so, but what I what I try and, but you know, obviously being someone that wants to sort of be recognized philosophically, I want to sort of be like, okay, I'm going to play your games philosophically, I'm going to try and do my best, but I'm going to try and fold them in on themselves, you know, sort of use language to dismantle itself. And that's kind of the way I'm sort of doing it. And as a result, you are sort of, and you do sort of end up, and it's very interesting, sort of, you do sort of end up in a place where you're like, but you're not talking about this, you can't talk about this sort of this great spiritual experience. And I'm like, no, but you have to, like, but by understanding that language itself is contradictory, you kind of have to have this kind of sense of faith, and this is the kind of the point, you know. And
yeah,
it's very interesting to sort of, you know, to sort of to be like that. And I don't think you have to be religious to come to that conclusion. I don't think you have to be a, you know, Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or
yeah.
a Jew, or a Jewish person, or, you know, I'm my real pity comes in the sort of the real hard atheists that believe that they understand everything. Obviously, like, you know, being sort of very, I like science and everything, but, you know, like, it is so interesting to sort of, you know, hear, and I know I'm talking a lot here, but like, it is so interesting to sort of hear sort of scientists say, oh yeah, we'll just discover it. And it's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Not, I mean, like, you know, it, like, even from a sort of rational perspective, I'm like, you can't use science to understand the subjective condition. Like, there's no way. Like, you're basing it off culture that you've inherited.
Yeah.
This is a yeah.
No, I'm right there with you. I totally get it. So now I got to get a copy of your book. That solves that.
I mean, you can read it for free. You can read it for free. That's the wonderful thing about it. You can read it for free, but you can buy it as a token. And maybe we'll put the conversation back on NFTs, because we went down a very wonderful but very convoluted rabbit hole into sort of, you know, religiousness and stuff. But yeah, so as an NFT, you can read this book and you can buy it, and you can buy it as a token as well. So which means, you know, and obviously that means, you know, you own these sorts of, you know, the token of it. You own the symbolic value of it. That's kind of what I said to my friend earlier down at the harbor. I was like, it's the symbol of value that you're buying. You're not buying the rights to read it. That's ridiculous in a lot of ways. I don't think that's, you know, not you know, in my opinion, knowledge should be free, for God's sake, you know. Like this is how, you know, before middlemen decided to say, oh yeah, you're premium, I'll get Audible, you know, all that sort of stuff. But you know, so but when you buy the, you know, the fact that by buying the token, you're obviously supporting me and you're supporting the cause. This is,
which is something that I want to do, so I'll buy the token to support you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd love it, Elan. I'd love that so much. And you know, we're currently, I mean, nice little update we can do. We're currently working on how to change from Ethereum to Matic, because Ethereum, the gas fees are very high. Matic, the network's not quite as good, as far as I'm aware. I'm not really a technical person at all. You know, but gas fees are non-existent, which means when people want to buy the token for an Ethereum cent, you know, 1/100th of an Ethereum, they won't have to pay a ludicrous gas fee. And it is a wonderful thing when people, you know, and you hear people sort of saying, you know, well, you know, the gas fees are quite bad. And I'm like, yes, but no one in the space benefits from that. And everyone has an incentive to bring it down. And then you compare that obviously to like oil and beef and all the rest of it. You're sort of like, well, you know, these companies like Shell and McDonald's or whatever have no incentive to reduce their carbon footprint whatsoever, unless it's like deemed like sort of, you know, marketably advantageous, I suppose. But like this, you know, so this is, you know, and this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of the sort of like the urge to sort of be like, just hold on, you know, like trust us. And maybe as we come to sort of a close with this talk, you know, relax and just embrace it and go with the flow.
Yeah.
And just see what the hell happens. Yeah, I think we've been on for an hour now, Elan, and it has been lovely talking to you. Do you have anything else you want to sort of, anything else you want to, like, you know, pick my brain if you want to sort of announce or promote anything you've got? Obviously not any spoilers for any Disney Disney shows that you obviously know everything that, you know, is going to happen. You know what's going to happen to Vision and you know, and I don't know much other characters, but yeah.
No, you know, this has been so great. Like, you're just such a cool person to talk to. So just thanks for even inviting me into your world and letting me just hear about like your thought and your thought process. And man,
yeah, definitely.
This is so cool. Thank you. You know, I feel like we should just hop on another call sometime, because you're just such a cool person to kind of just like shoot the shit with.
And I mean, and you, man, and I mean, like, you know, I think a lot of people in the space are like really be like, well, thank you. But like, I think I'm going to, I think I might be hopping onto Token Smart on Wednesday. I think that's what Dylan said. If you're going,
Yes.
Is that right? So yeah.
Yes, I will be there.
You'll be there, yeah, and I think I will be as well. And we'll have a bit more, maybe a structured conversation about that. We'll do some planning for that, and I will get my other laptop's broken. I will get someone to record that, and for all viewers watching, you know, you will see this one very soon. You know, stay tuned. Watch this space, as it were.
Stay tuned.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. Well, lovely to talk to you, Elan. And yeah, and if you and everyone watching, if you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe and support the channel. If you you know, and above all, and if you want to talk to us about what you'd like to see more of, then please tell us that. I think above all, if you please share this sort of stuff with people that are skeptical of this space or even opposed to it. Yes. Those are the kinds of people that I want to really talk to more. I want to get those people involved, because we all sort of understand each other here, and we all sort of, you know, we all sort of pat ourselves on the back and be like, you know, we're doing such a great job. But as soon as you get outside your door and you walk around people, they're like, you know, people like, you know, no one knows what we're about. No one knows quite what's going on, and there's a lot of skepticism and a lot of kind of fear, I suppose. And
it's like trying to explain the internet before the internet was a thing.
It's exactly like that. probably, you know, and absolutely. I mean, silent films and sound. I remember when, you know, they used to call them talkies. I mean, you know, being so, you know, now you work for Disney, you know, you're on the complete other end of that. But like, you know, and you know, people did. They were like, you know, why would you want to pay to see people? Why do you want to film when people talk? You know, and it's the same thing every bloody time. And it's like, oh yeah, no, those were all okay. But this new one, this new NFT one, this is where we draw the line. That is so funny. And then one day everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, you don't know NFTs? You know, you know, that's just every, you know. So
are you living under a rock?
It's common knowledge. Yeah. And that's the thing, man. Yeah. All right, Elan, it's been lovely talking to you. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you next time.